Hey everybody, welcome back. My name is Haddad, and today is going to be a more serious video because I realized that I haven't done this in a while and it's important. So, backstory, I'm a recovering drug addict. I've been sober for a few years now. Heroin and cocaine were my drugs of choice. I got in a lot of legal trouble, but the worst one was when I robbed a pharmacy, not with a gun, with a note. My mom will get mad if I don't tell you that, but with the note, went to prison, and then work release, and then house arrest, and I'm still on probation, but that's almost over with. Normally the lights behind me are on the blue Christmas lights, but that's how I denote if the video is more personal and just me talking to you, I guess. So my parents and my siblings and other people, but my parents primarily had a really, really hellacious time with my addiction. Not because they're not smart and not because they really even handled things the wrong way, but because by its very nature, addiction is awful and it really hurts the people around the addict. It hurts the addict arguably worse than anyone else, but I think in the case of parents, assuming the parents are involved and, part of a loving family, it probably hurts them more in a lot of cases. So, and I don't mean to diminish any of the pain that my siblings and stuff went through, especially my sister Emily, because she went through it like crazy. So, I wanted to maybe make a video that could be helpful to parents. I've made several videos that are sort of this, and tried to give some suggestions, talk about how I feel about tough love, which is the thing that my parents heard about most. I went to rehab 6 or 7 times, and almost every occasion the counselors and whatever and the doctors would say that tough love was the way to go. And they went to Al-Anon, which is basically Alcoholics Anonymous, but not for the alcoholic, for the person that knows the alcoholic, family or otherwise. And it's a way, it's a 12-step program that helps you live a life separate from this addict that's hurting you, but being able to be, like lovingly disconnected. So you can still be involved. You can still be a good parent, sibling, friend, wife, husband, whatever, but it not tear you down as much. And when they went there, they would hear the same stuff: tough love, tough love. And there are people, I'm thinking of one person, specifically, who has a sibling who they've had to in the comments of a subscriber, that they had to say to her brother, goodbye until you get your stuff together, goodbye, because they had to protect themselves. So I can't say that tough love is well, what I was saying is I made a bunch of videos and I wanted to maybe be a little bit more concise today. I'm clearly doing a bad job, but tough love in my case would have meant that I died, because it happened multiple times. Hospitals, overdoses. Basically, the only reason here is because one of my overdoses, I just got lucky. The cleaning lady at a hotel that I was at, alone, laying on the ground for multiple days, happened to hear me, and she thought I was just some drunk making a mess and, throwing up and stuff. But I was I was passed out, had been, like I said, for a couple of days. And when the cop came to arrest me for being too drunk, he realized what he was hearing through the hotel door was somebody that was dying. So that's not what this video is about. But tough love for me would have been that out on the street, So I overdosed a lot of times at my parents' house. They had to deal with it. And any of those occasions could have been that occasion that happened at the hotel again. So, and I don't know that I would have gotten as lucky. So, and they knew that. They knew that, the tough love thing was like, I hear you, that's easy to say, but you don't know our son. And I don't think I'm necessarily unique. I think there's a lot of addicts who, if you say goodbye, you're off, whatever, go away, that it's not even that out of resentment that we would end up dying, but it would be that we're just not able to take care of ourselves when we're in active addiction. And so if people that care about us aren't around, there's a good chance we're just going to die. And that's not to say that tough love doesn't have a place in taking care of an addict. But I think, the tough love that the therapists and the counselors and at Al-Anon that was being told my parents is, kick him out. If he were my son, I'd kick him out. And, you can have this tough love, but scaled down, right? So my advice to the parent of a drug addict, first is there is a difference between a 45-year-old drug addict and a 15-year-old drug addict or a 25-year-old drug addict. That's a difference. There's a big difference. Well, there's not that many differences, but I think by the time someone's gotten to be 45 and whatever you've been doing isn't working, maybe then it is time to try something more grave. But accountability at any stage of this person's addiction is a good thing. So holding someone accountable, the drug addict holding them accountable without being snide and without seeming vindicated, happy that you caught them messing up and now you get to hold them accountable, that's not it. But accountable like this. For a lot of years, and still to some extent, I was in a position that I couldn't make money. I couldn't make any money because I was physically unable to work, basically. I would get a job for a few months and then I would relapse and I would lose it. And when I was using, I couldn't be anywhere. I couldn't be in public, that's for sure. And so money was coming from my parents. And they're not wealthy. And I just mean like money for gas in the car or something, which I wasn't driving a lot. If you're not working and the only reason you're going to leave the house is to get drugs, well, we're certainly not going to put gas in the car. You know what I mean? But normal stuff like food, like Taco Bell. I don't mean like I'm asking for money for, buy me buy me an Xbox. Not like that. Just regular stuff that somebody would ask for money for. And the way that they learned to give me that money, it had to be tracked. That meant if I wanted to go do something that cost money, that it was reasonable that they would go with me to this thing. They would go with me. You want McDonald's? All right, let's go to McDonald's. They're going to take me because they're not just going to hand me cash. If a drug addict is using and you hand them cash, you're not silly for doing that or anything, but you can basically guess that's where it's going. Unless they're already set, they already have their drug of choice, that's basically where it's going to go to drugs. It doesn't matter how wonderful your son is or daughter or whatever. I think I was a good son as best I could be. I love my parents. I always have. But addiction is not an issue of morality. Your addict, child or whatever, the way that they behave under the influence or when they're seeking to be under the influence, that has nothing to do with how good of a person they are. Just like when they're sober and they're awful to you, that has nothing to do with their addiction. So you can't really rest on, I'm just going to keep saying son. My son is a good person, so I can trust them with this money. Even though they have this struggle, this mental illness of addiction, I can trust them with this, that, and the other. You can't, because you're not trusting your son with that. You're trusting the addiction. When someone is in active addiction, they're not in control. It's not them. You might see brief glimpses of them, but they're not the one behind the steering wheel. And I don't just mean when they're high. I mean all the time. Until their life is in order and has been for a bit, and you can really see that they're on top of things and they're not only serious about getting and staying sober, but that it's a real part of their life. Like, oh, that's just how it is for them. They're just sober now. Until you see that, I don't think you need to put yourself in a position to trust that they're the one behind the steering wheel. And that, I'm sure, is difficult. I've never been the other person. I've always been the addict. But I think as far as going back to the tough love thing, like protecting yourself, you can protect yourself without hurting the addict, right? And that means like, don't put yourself in a position to be hurt. Now, obviously that means like, well, the addict's in my house, I'm in a position to be hurt. But I more so mean, don't set yourself up for failure. Don't, lend them something that you need to get back, that money you need back or whatever. Don't let them borrow the car. Don't, there's a lot of ways to hold somebody accountable and act as though the addiction is the thing leading them, without going to extremes, like chaining them to the bedpost or whatever. But I think a good way to protect yourself is just to assume that until they have proven to you over the course of however long that takes, a year, that they're not in control. They're not the ones in control. And I know that's got to be scary, and maybe it sounds hopeless, but I don't even mean it that way. I just mean, if you protect yourself that way and you hold them accountable that way, you're being of service to them. You're putting them in a position where they have to face their addiction without being isolated from the people they love, without feeling like you no longer care about them. They're seeing that even if they're trying to convince themselves that the addiction is under control, that these are real active consequences for my addiction, that I haven't gotten trust back yet, that things aren't where they need to be. My parents won't let me drive to McDonald's by myself, whatever it is. I'm being very scatterbrained right now. So I guess that's the first thing is I'm all for tough love, except never forget that that addiction is not simply an inconvenience. It's a statistically lethal mental illness. It kills people. So if somebody is sick physically and they're dying from it, and it's painful, and their physical pain causes them to be a real prick, I am not going to kick them out of the house because it's a bummer to me that they're acting like an ass. I'm going to be upset that they're acting this way because of the pain that they're in. It's going to hurt my feelings, but I'm not going to say, okay, but I can't deal with it. Go handle your lethal ailment on your own. It's unfortunate, and it's even tragic, and it's one of the most difficult things that life can throw at you, that you can't escape from how awful a situation is, and you have to remain present through the pain. And I think that's, if you choose to be a part of it, that's the responsibility of somebody who is trying to help an addict and be there for an addict. They have a lethal mental illness, and it is wrong to tell that person you're homeless. It's just wrong. And so you have to find ways to protect yourself and also be helpful to them as best you can. And it's not any more complicated than, don't give them your wallet. Don't let them borrow the car and go downtown for 3 days and come back, and just be loving. So that's number one. Tough love's great, but you're dealing with somebody who could be dying of this. So keep that in the front of your head, that this is a dying person, potentially. Would I kick a dying person out? No. Two is, probably going to cut here because I can't remember. Okay. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a cut there. Maybe all over because I'm talking too much. Don't ignore it. Don't act like the addiction doesn't exist. I've seen lots of families. I've seen it in my own family, and I've actually seen it in my family with one of my siblings who's struggling with this right now. I've seen the family tries to go about life as normally as they can, which, I mean, how understandable is that? Like, of course, that's what you want. If the addict has kids, you don't want them to be affected, whatever. You want life to be as normal as possible. And like I said, of course, that's so understandable. To put it bluntly, too bad. It's not normal. Life isn't normal when you're living with an addict until they get sober. And then it's not only normal, it can be wonderful. It's not. So don't pretend, that it doesn't exist. When you come downstairs and they've clearly been up for 3 days, they're passed out, don't act like, oh, wow, do you have the flu? No, they don't have the flu. They're a drug addict. When they miss work and they try to feed you some BS like, yeah, I just wasn't really feeling like it. Or maybe you're so distracted by this lethal mental illness that you have that you can't engage with a career right now. I'll keep this as anonymous as I can, but again, this person I know is struggling with addiction, and he was supposed to come out to eat with my family and I. He didn't make it, and his wife brought the kids, and they came out, and when they showed up, it was it was like, we're not going to address the elephant in the room. The fact that this person didn't show up, we're just going to act like that didn't even, we're just going to, not even going to address it. Address it. Address it. You don't have to live this weird double life. You don't have to. I know that there is still this shame attached because of the stigma of addiction. You don't have to buy into that, because good people, smart people get it. They just get it. And some people are not going to get it. But do you want the people that don't get it in your life? Do you want them involved in your life? You don't deserve to feel ashamed because you're trying to help an addict. The addict doesn't deserve to feel ashamed because they have a mental illness. You don't have to pretend like stuff's normal, because it's not. And you're going to do yourself a disservice. And when you pretend it's normal, that stuff isn't effed up, you're helping the addict protect their addiction. When you're in active addiction, I'll speak for myself, I would try to make my world as small and controllable as possible, because this bubble is what allowed me to live so poorly and so unhealthily, and sometimes, so selfishly, because there were, outside of that bubble, there were people that are going to say, what? That's messed up. Why would you do that? And, ooh, you're a drug addict. And sorry, you can't come to work high. So this bubble needed to be very small, because I felt like drugs were on my side. Drugs were the only thing that allowed me to get through life. It was my self-defense mechanism. It was my coping mechanisms. It was drugs. That's it. And so anything that threatened me using drugs was a threat to the one thing that allowed me to protect myself. That's what it felt like. And so if you help the addict reinforce that bubble by trying to convince their employer that, oh, they're just sick, when they don't show up to something that they should have been at, just acting like, oh, I think they were busy, or you don't have to do that. And when they try to convince you that the bubble that they're creating is reality, that it's real and understandable, you don't have to buy into that either. When they try to blame you for something that's not your fault, you don't have to buy into that. And this can be difficult, because I think there's a lot of room for contention here. You can get into arguments because I would want this bubble to remain intact. And you don't have to go and actively try to pop it, but you're certainly not going to keep sharp objects away from it, because it's exhausting. So they might get angry with you that you're not willing to lie for them. And, you might have some disagreements with people that have ideas about how you should be handling this person's addiction. But guess what? It's not up to them. It's not up to them. And as much as I have insight into addiction and how my family behaved and other families have behaved and all that, I don't know your situation. I can't say exactly what you should do, because as predictable as addiction is, it's like predictably unpredictable as well. So don't exhaust yourself trying to protect this addict from anything other than mortality. That's what I'm saying is it's not your job to make the addict cozy. Their life doesn't have to be pleasant until they get sober. But you also don't want them to die. So here's what my parents did that saved me. That was the reason that I think they, knocked it out of the park when they were trying to help me, is they kept me alive. And as best they could, they kept me in places where I wouldn't end up dying. So as best they could, they kept me out of prison. As best they could, they kept car keys out of my hands when they knew it was going to be an issue. But they weren't lavishing me with new clothes and fancy bed sheets and, and do what you want. But it's okay for the addict to feel like their life sucks, because it does suck. But here's where I think the one thing that and I hope this is the case all the time, but maybe it's not, so be careful. But this is the one thing I want you to trust the addict with, is I want you to trust that the addict knows at some level, even if they're not outward with it, at some level, they know that their life sucks, that this isn't right. Even if it's the only thing that's ever worked, it's not right, that maybe there's something on the other side of the fence. And trust that eventually, and it could take a long, long time, but eventually they're going to be fed up with being fed up. They're going to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. You've probably heard that before. Only trust, don't trust them with the keys. Don't trust them with the money, blah, blah, blah. Trust that they want better for themselves. If they didn't care about feeling good and being happy, they wouldn't care about getting high. That's the whole point, is they're miserable. They don't know how to cope with life. And so they're going to use chemicals because it's the only thing that's ever worked. So something in them is telling them, you feel bad, fix it. And eventually, drugs stop working. It just makes stuff worse and worse. You don't get high anymore. You just get normal, and not even normal. And then the legal trouble, and the health trouble, and it sucks. Okay, and that's why it's dangerous, because it gets worse and worse and worse, but that's where you're getting somewhere, because the drugs have stopped working. The drugs have started to cause more problems than they're solving. And they're always causing more problems, but talking about it from the addict's perspective, So it's okay to let the addict's life get worse and worse. You just want to do your best, and God, that's difficult, I know, to keep them alive on the way to that worse and worse. And so trust that somewhere in them, they want to feel better. And when their option of getting high stops making them feel better, that they will seek something else, and then you'll be there. You won't have kicked them out of the house. You'll be around to say, okay, well, let's figure it out together. It's messy. It is going to be messy. You're going to get hurt. You're going to have stuff stolen probably. I sold stuff that I treasured, or at least I thought I treasured more than anything in the world. I stole from people that, they were so proud that despite me being a tragic addict who was physically addicted to the hardest drugs in the world, yeah, but he never stole from me. That's how good of a person he is. And I stole from them. All of it. I sold my soul and just did insane things. So pain is going to be a part of it. there's no way for me to prove it, but I believe from decades of experience going through this crap that trying to live authentically, that is not acting like it isn't real, pretending that life is normal, not kicking the person out to protect yourself, and, kicking them out of your life, kicking them out of the house. There's different ways to kick people out, and trusting that addiction only goes one direction. It only goes down. And so eventually they're going to end up in a position where they can't deny it anymore. It doesn't work for them. And it's not like when they get to that point, it's all going to click and it's going to be perfect and they're going to figure it out. No, there's probably still going to be some relapses. There's still going to be some messes that you're involved in with them. But they're at least, that seed has been planted. They know now that they've hit the end of their road with drugs. And maybe it's time to look for something else. And don't look for it to make sense, because it's not going to make sense. Okay, there's very little in addiction that makes any sense. And it's going to be embarrassing. And lots of people aren't going to get it, but even more are going to. You'd be surprised, I think, at how many people are living quiet lives, but that fully understand what it's like to have a parent who's an addict, or a sibling, or a kid, or a friend. Like, people get it. Don't fall for stuff. This is the last thing I'll say. Don't fall for crap. The only thing I've ever found that helped me, that helped other addicts, is that they were fed up with ruining their own life. That's the only thing. No vitamins, no certain pill, no special rehab. No, this is the best doctor in the state. No, listen to this song backwards 3 times a day. Nothing. They had to just ruin their lives over and over again and stay alive through that. And then they end up at a place where they want to get better. Not because other people say, hey, your life's messed up, you should get it together. And then they're like, wow, they're right, I should get it together. But they don't actually want to. They have to want to. I had to want to. It was confusing. It was confusing for me as the addict. But don't fall for stuff. Don't fall for the miracle cure. There isn't one. Don't fall for, I had a therapist who was only well-intentioned. And she tried to help me 1,000 different ways. And they all cost a lot of money. And none of them helped. Don't fall for it. I'm not mad at her. I'm just saying. And it is okay, though, talking about that loving detachment. It is okay for you to try to find ways to take care of yourself. I understand that if you're going to allow this addict to be in your life, and you love them and their life is on fire, that it's probably all you're going to be able to think about. I get that. I get it, because I'm the addict. Again, I'm not the, other person, but it's okay for you in that 5% of the time that you're not thinking about them to try to find ways for you to be happy. That is okay. It is. And I think it's okay for the addict to know that because of the way they are, the sickness that they have, it's hard for you to be happy, but that you're trying. Like, it's okay for you to be honest with them. It is. I know it can be scary probably to share with the addict, because what if I upset them and then they go get high? They're going to get high anyways. They're going to get high if they're happy, if they're upset, if they're angry, if they're jealous, if they're whatever. They're going to get high when they get a promotion because all this money's coming in, and they're going to get high when they get fired because, I got fired. I can't believe it. My life is over. And so even if they point the finger at you and say it's your fault, it's not, because they would have done it anyways, because that's what addiction is. It's a mental illness that leads back to the same conclusion every time. Get high, get high, get high. That's it. And until the them that is really them, not the addiction driving anymore, but them, until they get to a point where they know, here's me and here's this voice that is actually addiction, and I don't want that addiction to drive my life anymore, there's nothing. So the best things that you can do until they get to that point themselves is just keep them alive. Keep them alive. If they're an opiate addict, look into Narcan. If they overdose, there's a possibility you can help them before, EMTs arrive. Just keep them alive, because like I said, I'm going to stop talking, I swear. Addiction goes one direction, and that's it. Recovery goes the other direction. And I'm not talking about 12 steps. I'm not talking about any program. I'm just saying you're either getting worse or you're getting better. And if you're staying put, you're basically just waiting to get worse. So whoever you are, parent, friend, lover, wife, husband, whatever you are, whoever you are that's watching this, thank you for watching this. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Any questions. If you want, you can email me at w.max.haddad1223@gmail.com. If you don't want to post it in the comments, feel free to email me anything there. Not anything, but you know what I'm saying. Any questions, anything. And it might seem hopeless. As long as they're alive, it's not hopeless. That's it. Period. They're either alive or it's hopeless. That's it. So stay strong. Hopefully this is the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do. That's for sure. And I'm almost certain my parents would say the same thing. In fact, I would be amazed if they didn't say that me being an addict was the hardest thing they've ever had to deal with. I would be amazed. You can do this. If you're watching this video, you give a fuck. So just keep it up. Keep them alive as best you can. Don't kill yourself keeping them alive, but at the end of the day, that's the goal. You can do it. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.